Hi everyone. Third time's a charm, they say. I've tried to do this story 2 other times this week and it just has not been working for me. So I decided I'm going to try again. So welcome to today's edition of Aunt Allie's Story Time. And I am bringing you Cloudy with a Chance of Meatballs. So some of you may have already watched the movie and Cloudy with a Chance of Meatballs Part 2 and Cloudy with a Chance of Meatballs 3, but I'm going to bring you the original story that inspired the movie Cloudy with a Chance of Meatballs. So I want you to listen and see if your favorite food is featured in our story today. And this was written by Judi Barrett, and it was drawn by Barrett. So Cloudy with a Chance of Meatballs. We were all sitting around the big kitchen table. It was Saturday morning, pancake morning. Mom was squeezing oranges for juice. Henry and I were betting on how many pancakes we each could eat, and Grandpa was doing the flipping. Do you like pancakes? Seconds later, something flew through the air, headed toward the kitchen ceiling, and landed right on Henry. After we realized that the flying object was only a pancake, we all laughed, even Grandpa. Breakfast continued quite uneventfully. All the other pancakes landed in the pan, and all of them were eaten, even the one that landed on Henry. Oh. That's Penny. That night, touched off by the pancake incident at breakfast, Grandpa told us the best tall tale bedtime story he'd ever told. So let me just tell you quickly, a tall tale is a story of an exaggeration. It's usually something that is so exaggerated and so crazy that it could never happen. Okay, so here is the tall tale that Grandpa ever told. Across an ocean, over lots of huge bumpy mountains, across 3 hot deserts and 1 small ocean, there lay the tiny town of Chew and Swallow. So there's the journey to Chew and Swallow. The little tiny town of Chew and Swallow. In most ways, it was very much like any other tiny town. It had a main street lined with stores, houses with trees and gardens around them, a schoolhouse, about 300 people, and some assorted cats and dogs. But there were no food stores in the town of Chew and Swallow. They didn't need any. The sky supplied all the food they could possibly want. The only thing that was really different about Chew and Swallow was its weather. It came 3 times a day, at breakfast, lunch, and dinner. Everything that everyone ate came from the sky. Uh-oh. Whatever the weather served, that was what they ate. But it never rained rain. It never snowed snow. And it never blew just wind. It rained things like soup and juice. It snowed mashed potatoes and green peas. And sometimes the wind blew in storms of hamburgers. Could you imagine it raining soup or juice, and that's what you had to eat? And the wind blowing in hamburgers, and that's what you had to eat? Oh my. The people could watch the weather report on television in the morning, and they would even hear a prediction for the next day's food. When the townspeople went outside, they carried their plates, cups, glasses, forks, spoons, knives, and napkins with them. That way, they would always be prepared for any kind of weather. If there were leftovers, and there usually were, the people took them home and put them in their refrigerators in case they got hungry in between meals. So there they are listening to the weather report. And there they are outside catching their food. The menu varied. By the time they woke up in the morning, breakfast was coming down. After a brief shower of orange juice, low clouds of sunny side up eggs moved in, followed by pieces of toast, butter and jelly sprinkled down for the toast, and most of the time, it rained milk afterwards. For lunch one day, frankfurters, already in their rolls, blew in from the northwest at about 5 miles an hour. There were mustard clouds nearby. Then the wind shifted to the east and brought in baked beans. A drizzle of soda finished off the meal. So, frankfurters are another name for hot dogs. I wouldn't mind if the sky rained hot dogs. I like hot dogs with spicy brown mustard and relish and some onions. Dinner one night consisted of lamb chops, becoming heavy at times, with occasional ketchup. Periods of peas and baked potatoes were followed by a gradual clearing with wonderful jello setting in the west. The sanitation department of Chew and Swallow had a rather unusual job for a sanitation department. It had to remove the food that fell on the houses and sidewalks and lawns. The workers cleaned things up after every meal and fed all the dogs and cats. Then they emptied some of it into the surrounding oceans for the fish and turtles and whales to eat. The rest of the food was put back into the earth so that the soil would be richer for the people's flower gardens. So there's the big jello setting. And there they are, cleaning things up and feeding the pets. Life for the townspeople was delicious until the weather took a turn for the worse. Chew and Swallow digest. Spaghetti ties up town. Record-breaking pasta fall causes chaos. Traffic snarled on Lower Intestine Street. One day, there was nothing but gorgonzola cheese all day long. The next day, there was only broccoli, all overcooked. And the next day, there were Brussels sprouts and peanut butter with mayonnaise. Another day, there was pea soup fog. No one could see where they were going, and they could barely find the rest of the meal that got stuck in the fog. Ooh, look at all of that. Could you imagine? Brussels sprouts and peanut butter and mayonnaise? The food was getting larger and larger, and so were the portions. The people were getting frightened. Violent storms blew up frequently. Awful things were happening. One Tuesday, there was a hurricane of bread and rolls all day long and into the night. There were soft rolls and hard rolls, some with seeds and some without. There was white bread and rye and whole wheat toast. Most of it was larger than they had ever seen bread and rolls before. It was a terrible day. Everyone had to stay indoors. Roofs were damaged, and the sanitation department was beside itself. The mess took the workers 4 days to clean up, and the sea was full of floating rolls. To help out, the people piled up as much bread as they could in their backyards, and the birds picked at it a bit, but it just stayed there and got staler and staler. There was a storm of pancakes one morning and a downpour of maple syrup that nearly flooded the town. A huge pancake covered the school. No one could get it off because of its weight, so they had to close school. Could you imagine getting an alert now message from your school saying, "School's canceled today because a huge pancake covered the school and no one can get in"? Oh my goodness gracious. Lunch one day brought 15-inch drifts of cream cheese and jelly sandwiches. Everyone ate themselves sick, and the day ended with a stomach ache. There was an awful salt and pepper wind accompanied by an even worse tomato tornado. People were sneezing themselves silly and running to avoid the tomatoes. The town was a mess. There were seeds and pulp everywhere. Oh my goodness. Could you imagine if something like this came to your town? Can you see how this is a tall tale? Something that really can't happen, but it's fun to tell? Yeah. The sanitation department gave up. The job was too big. Everyone feared for their lives. They couldn't go outside most of the time. Many houses had been badly damaged by giant meatballs. Stores were boarded up, and there was no more school for the children. So a decision was made to abandon the town of Chew and Swallow. It was a matter of survival. So they are going to leave the town of Chew and Swallow. People glued together the giant pieces of stale bread style, sandwich style with peanut butter and took the absolute necessities with them and set sail on their rafts for a new land. So there's their peanut butter boat. And look at what their sails are made out of on their boat. That looks like Swiss cheese, doesn't it? And maybe a slice of pizza, maybe with some pepperoni and mushrooms on it. Oh, goodness. After being afloat for a week, they finally reached a small coastal town, which welcomed them. The bread had held up surprisingly well enough for them to build temporary houses for themselves out of it. The children began school again, and the adults all tried to find places for themselves in the new land. The biggest change they had to make was getting used to buying food at the supermarket. They found it odd that the food was kept on shelves, packaged in boxes, cans, and bottles. Meat that had to be cooked was kept in large refrigerators. Nothing came down from the sky except rain and snow. The clouds above their heads were not made of fried eggs. No one ever got hit by a hamburger again. And nobody dared go back to Chew and Swallow to find out what had happened to it. They were all too afraid. Now, Henry and I were awake until the very end of Grandpa's story. I remember his goodnight kiss. So you like how the story was real colorful when Grandpa was telling his tall tale, and now we're getting back to those black and white sketch drawings? The next morning, we woke up to see snow falling outside our window. We ran downstairs for breakfast and ate it a little faster than usual so we could go sledding with Grandpa. It's funny, but even as we were sliding down the hill, we thought we saw a giant pat of butter at the top, and we could almost smell mashed potatoes. The end. So I really like this story because I really like the artwork, and I like how when the story is a regular story, it's all the black and white sketch work. But as Grandpa is telling his tall tale about the food from the skies, it was colorful and made you really feel like you were in the story. So a great story, Cloudy with a Chance of Meatballs. So what do you think? If the sky had to send down food for us to eat instead of going shopping, what is the one thing that you wish the sky would drop for you? Would it be pizza? Would it be macaroni and cheese? Would it be blue Dorito chips? The ones in the blue bag. Would it be hot dogs? Would it be broccoli? What about apples and oranges, bananas? What about pudding? So many things to think about. So anyway, I am really hoping that you enjoyed this story on Aunt Allie's Storytime for today, Cloudy with a Chance of Meatballs. And as always, sleep tight, pleasant dreams, and we will see you next time.